on scene with a 53-year-old male, Paul Smithson, happy on arrival of crew. Unknown downtime, found by rotated hotel at MGM. Patient did have a exercise rubber band around his neck. Suggestions of possible strangulation, trauma to the back of the head, 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 trauma to the back of the head.
Welcome everyone, this is Karl and Denny with Get Wisdom, and today we're going to continue with the channeling series, and Karl's going to channel Chris Cornell, who is a fairly famous vocalist in the rock scene. He was found dead in his Detroit hotel room in 2017, May of 2017. They ruled it as a suicide, but there's quite a bit of controversy about that, whether it was an actual suicide or not. I was able to do the recording of the first responders when they found him and they described the situation. Did not sound like a suicide to me, but I could be biased as well. So anyway, we're going to maybe burrow down and get some truth about this, whether it was a murder or a suicide, or maybe a combination of the two in some fashion, which would not be a new thing for us. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. Thank you, Karl. And we'll have a little discussion about this and the channeling work, and then we'll channel Chris Cornell.
All right. Thank you, Danny. Thanks to all of you who are watching this. We reach out to the light to talk with many people who have been part of the culture. They've been here and had lifetimes and departed and gone back home. And the interesting thing is, through channeling, we can be connected to their consciousness so they can tell their story, give us a perspective about things that might have happened to them, and maybe solve some mysteries, leave another legacy, information-wise at least, even though they can't be here any longer in the flesh. They can still weigh in about what happened to them, and also a perspective about the culture and maybe the meaning of their life and things they cared about. And certainly care about still as a light being, and even seeing more the things going on that are not right. There is darkness abroad in the land, and we probe into it because we can. We have a friend in the Almighty who helps us with guidance and information and inspires this whole enterprise. So in reaching out to the light, we're talking to the consciousness of Chris Cornell's being. Back home now, left the body behind, but the soul goes back. The consciousness of his being, which is an extension of the soul to begin with. And that's all that we are. We're an extension of our consciousness from our soul, and it's housed temporarily in a physical body. And that's all we're doing here. We're animating an animal form, if you will, a physical form, for a time, as long as that holds out, because it's fragile, as we all know. But we will go back home to the light. Hopefully, some get stuck along the way, and we're going to be asking about his situation also in that regard.
Yeah.
And it's a road hazard, because the darkness wants to suppress everything that's good. And it's rather important to look at all aspects of existence, good and bad. And especially because we don't have to worry about goodness. We don't have to be concerned what it might spring on us and make things change, because most likely goodness will be changing things for the better. And what's not to like about that? But things that are bad, things that are dark and have an evil origin, are purposely designed to drag down as much as can be arranged. And that's not a small thing. So to deny its existence and ignore it is a mistake. So you can dismiss the kinds of things we probe into from time to time that might be involved, at least in part, with conspiracy theories, so-called, and dismiss that as some kind of flaky craziness of ours. But keep in mind that that term itself is a disinformation dodge of the CIA that's used to treat everyone pejoratively with a kind of sneering, cynical negativity that's unwarranted. Because what's going on when people raise these issues is they have concerns. They're worried about something, and they deserve to get answers. Now, they might be going off half-cocked. They might haven't carefully considered all the information available, and sometimes there just isn't enough to decide the matter, and anyone can speculate. But they're not necessarily wrong in just speculating either.
Right.
I mean, every investigation starts there. You know, everyone isn't informed about everything at the outset. You got to go looking. You got to do an inquiry. So
it's part of the creative process.
Exactly.
You're going to see it in science. You're going to see it in art. You're going to see it in police work. You're going to see it in writing, everything, philosophy.
Yeah. So really, the conspiracy theorists, so-called, I don't like the term because it is pejorative, and it's not particularly accurate either. It's prejudging what they're doing.
Right.
It's assuming that one word has such a dark connotation. You're lumping that person in with all the nuts, the crazies, the flakes, the people willfully distorting things through propaganda to cause trouble and foment discord and all of that. And yes, those things happen. But many times an insightful researcher can put forth an idea that is alarming and controversial, and doing it out of genuine concern for truth. And they get lumped in with this horde of people who stir up nonsense to get attention and make money off of it and so on. And it's a disservice to the truth. It's a disservice to serious scholarship. And many of those individuals labeled that way are serious scholars in their own way. And many of them have a sixth sense about things. They're picking up intuitively. There's something fishy here.
Right.
And it's because they're more open than the average person, they pursue it. And that's usually a sign of someone who is more free than the average individual, ironically. So that's the kind of person who's more likely to get to the truth than someone who just goes with mainstream thinking and poo-poos every odd idea, odd-seeming idea, let's put it that way. So we'll see today if there's anything that our subject wants to share along those kinds of lines. But I just wanted to make that comment because the irony here is that we're in a contest between good and evil, and the darkness fears basically three types of individuals. One of them is the group of spiritual and religious folk, because they have a power that's mysterious to the darkness, but it is real. Another one is they fear the paranormal. They fear people who have an intuitive ability, because that they know such people can learn their secrets. Because really, there's nothing truly hidden.
Right.
Everything is on record. And if you can see the Akashic records, you can see everyone's story. So they fear people who are whistleblowers, who know something, or who intuit maybe some of the people coming forward are telling the truth, and they'll back them and interview them and tell their story and go looking for other connections to make about it, and really fill in the blanks in a way that the mainstream authorities will never do. They cover everything up because they're part of the problem. They're being managed and controlled. So I'm not defending everyone. Every person is an individual. Every circumstance is unique. And I know there are people who are irresponsible in promoting the so-called unusual, the fringe ideas and so on. I've seen it, and I know they are easily corrupted, some of them, and they're used in that way to create disinformation. So there's no better way to cover up something sinister that's going on than to get a lot of would-be commentators to spread false stories about it that then get uncovered, right. And
then they can discredit the whole group.
And then it sticks in everyone's mind. Oh, well, that's all nonsense.
Yeah.
That's all conspiracy theories. It's the same, crazies, the nut jobs, and so on.
Guilt by association, straw dog arguments. There's a whole collection of logical fallacies that are not taught anymore in the government schools. So people fall prey to these, seemingly logical conclusions that are drawn from, claims. And that's one of the reasons that this whole CIA conspiracy theorist things got traction, is because people are not taught how to think critically anymore. That's not. It used to, in the old style government schools, like back in the late 1800s, you could send your kid to school and they'd come home, and one of their courses that they took was logic, and they would learn about all the logical fallacies and stuff. Well, by the turn of the century, all of that, by the time the Dewey system got installed, all of that was gone. It was a distant memory. You'd have to go back 20 years to find somebody who'd gone through a school in the United States anyway where they'd learned things like that, critical thinking. not taught. I guess it could be taught in some places, somewhere, maybe the Montessori schools, something like that. But I think it's disappeared mostly from people's education, and that's why this kind of nonsense can get so much, like I say, traction, and it just becomes part of the culture. Like, oh, he's a conspiracy theorist, and that just shuts the whole conversation down right there. Nothing more to be said about it.
And the thing to keep in mind about it is there are people who are on the inside who run things, and then there are the outsiders. So when you hear that label bandied about, it's being bandied about by an insider who's keeping the secrets.
Yeah.
They don't want the outsiders to have any power, to have any platform, any voice, any recognition. And this has been true all along the way. And I was just eating my lunch and I was watching on cable a rerun of All the President's Men about Watergate and the conspiracy in the Nixon era with the Watergate break-in and the burglary that happened, and the whistleblower at one scene mentions to the reporter about what's going on in the government, that it's bigger than you know, that what's going on with the political skullduggery and manipulations involves the FBI, the Department of Justice, the CIA. They're all a part of it.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happened? Some of the political people went to jail. And Nixon, was deposed. He was cast out and so on. But nothing happened to the established order, the real power.
Yeah.
The politics
or the real people in the established order. A lot of the people that Nixon had to answer to while being the so-called president, his handlers, scot-free.
Exactly.
Nothing ever happened.
Exactly.
Nobody even looked up.
Yeah.
And so, like you say, that's an old story. You could trace that kind of phenomenon clear back to the Roman times.
Yeah. And so if the truth of that whole thing ever really came out, it would undermine the cabal. Well, that's not going to be allowed to happen. And it wasn't then either.
Right.
You just got this surface layer. And politics is a show trial. It's a surface illusion that's created to make us believe we have some control over things and we have a say in things.
Yeah.
But they're not really in control. Their power is only what is allowed by the hidden hand.
Right.
And there you go. Here's a conspiracy theory if you want one. But this is reality. And so those who stumble on parts of the truth and want to tell the story are going to get hammered, and they're going to get, whitewashed with these kinds of accusations and labels. So we have to look deeper and listen.
So one of the contentions here with this Chris Cornell story is that he, like Anthony Bourdain, like the claims made by Anthony Bourdain, was getting ready to go public about what he knew about the Hollywood and music industry pedophile rings. And he, as he aged, he was in his early 50s, he started to be more concerned about social justice and this kind of thing. That's why he was involved in this movie called The Promise, which is a documentary about the Armenian genocide. One of the last things he did was write a theme song that was, I guess, played in the credits of this song, or this in this documentary. So they contend, some people contend that that's why he was murdered, is because he was getting ready to speak out. And he is among a fairly large group of people who suffered untimely and odd deaths. Almost all of them ruled as a suicide. And some of their closer friends around them are saying, oh, wait a minute, this doesn't add up. This is not someone at a place in their life where they were feeling desperate and backed into a corner, and that was their only solution, is to kill themselves. If you go look at the mainstream media accounts, you'll see this repeated often. This is from Wikipedia. Cornell struggled with depression for most of his life. This is repeated over and over and over again as the justification for why the suicide was a good call in this case. Even though in his case, a lot of the evidence was overlooked or misrepresented. And in some cases, with some of his compatriots who suffered a similar situation, they just flat out withheld information from the families and the news about what they actually saw at the scene of the death. The toxicology reports, if they did a what's it called when they do a medical examination after they pass.
Post-mortem.
Post-mortem, evaluations and stuff, and a lot of that information is just not available. So there's no way to come to a definitive conclusion about it. It just turns into a debate, an argument about, what the evidence is actually pointing towards. So, unfortunately, what we found out in the channeling series is that a lot of the, I would say, an inordinately large percentage of these so-called suicides are not suicides. In some cases, they're actually an ET manipulation, where from on the surface of things, it looks like a suicide, but actually they were driven to it through an ET manipulation. So in that case, you could say, well, is that really a suicide?
Yeah,
I'd say no.
Well, and we do hear this on occasion when we speak to people in the light who died that way, in terms of the press and what was told to everyone, and they contradict it flatly because they were there and they know the truth of what's gone on in their life because they've had their life review. They can see their life play back and will know who manipulated and influenced them. They weren't aware of when they were alive.
Right.
Because they have a wider purview as a light being, and they can see all the conspiracies and machinations of the powers that be, and how they were manipulated and influenced in many ways, because we all get this. We're all manipulated subliminally, for one thing, with all sorts of beliefs, political beliefs and ideological beliefs. We're allowed to have certain personal standards and leanings, but those get manipulated because it's handy for the interlopers, because it leads to discord. If you have people who are more conservative and people who are more liberal, and you ramp up their passions individually such that they end up fearing and loathing one another, that's a win for the darkness. And no one would imagine that you're not living in a free country, because people are allowed to spout all sorts of invectives at each other and even sometimes fight with one another. And it's all accepted as, well, of course that's going to happen. Yeah. Because these people really care, and it's a free country and all that. Yeah. And it's all a charade. It's a forced manipulation that darkens everything it touches.
Yeah.
So we can't come together. We can't find common ground. It's not possible in today's world. It's seen to.
Yeah. Okay, I think it's Chris's turn now. So let's go ahead and start the channeling and see what he has got to say. We've got 6 questions for him, and we're going to beat this topic up pretty thoroughly in the series of questions. You'll see that as we go. And we get to see Chris Cornell's account of things from the light.
Well, this will be interesting. Maybe he'll just tell us, well, that was all conspiracy theories and it had nothing to do with me. I have no idea.
Okay, well, let's find out.
Yeah. Well, so I just got your questions for him yesterday, and I wasn't really sure who this was. And so I'm revenue neutral about it. But I do know that bad things happen to good people, and bad things happen to bad people for bad reasons. It's not always getting your just desserts when you end up in trouble and lose your life in some way or another. So, all right, I will reach out to Creator of All It Is to connect me to Chris Cornell's consciousness in the light. so it can speak through me. And I do that through Creator for accuracy and for safety, to avoid hooking up with an imposter. Most channelers aren't channeling who they think they are. They get a story that sounds good to them, but they're actually being groomed. They're being given hand-holding to give them tidbits and uplifting spiritual things that keep them complacent and quite happy that they're doing something noble and genuine. And really they're being sidelined because they're not allowed to think about deeper, darker things. And that's why you see all this talk about sweetness and light, how the ascension is coming and there's nothing really to worry about. Everything's wonderful. And the opposite is really the case. We got serious trouble here. And if we don't solve it, we're not going to have an ascension. So I hate to slap anyone in the face, but we're here to bring truth forward, even if it's unpleasant, because the reality is we have the chance to have that ascension if we do our homework, learn about what's needed, and bring healing for those who would darken things. So let's find out from our subject today what he can tell us about this, okay? So give me a moment to get in the state of consciousness I need, and then we will hear from him. This is Chris Cornell speaking.
Thank you for joining us. It was reported that you committed suicide in your Detroit hotel room. What were the circumstances of your death, and were you able to transition successfully?
My death was a staged suicide, not a genuine one. And I say this with fervent hope that it will help those who cared for me and about me to breathe easier. My death to those who wish harm to all humans is not so very tragic, in the sense all of you are at risk of the same fate, being directly extinguished, and not a stage play enacted for other humans to keep them complacent. It may be a prelude in terms of what is earmarked to happen for the rest of you. So for those who cared about me, I want to be remembered as the artist I was and dedicated myself in pursuing the cause of truth through my music. That was my mission in life and awakened in me very early. This marked me for extra mischief, and mischief of a sinister kind and a deadly kind, as it turned out in my case. We can tell you that a majority of artists, musicians, and singers who take their lives, according to the official accounts, are actually killed, if not directly by agents who appear at their location and arrange their death, then indirectly through a concerted effort to undermine them emotionally and influence them to engage in risky conduct and risky behavior, alcoholism, heavy drug use, and so on. This is why a great performer who is beloved with a following of millions and enjoying luxury and wealth as a result of their efforts ends up killing themselves when they have a life that's envied equally by millions who would trade their life for that great artist and performer in a heartbeat because of the privileges it represents. To be sure, there are trade-offs, lack of privacy, the demands and complications of overseeing what is essentially a big business that builds over time, and a responsibility to the many involved in their career that they, in effect, become hostage to because their lives have been devoted to that performer. And everything is at stake if that performer lets them down. But even with those liabilities, reaching hearts and minds of millions of people is a rare privilege for a light being. And that is why everyone is here, to shine the light of the divine. And music is one of the most effective ways to bring God to the world and God's message of love. This lofty being your channel calls creator is all one and the same, the supreme deity and source of everything you know about and can experience, the entirety of the universe, and beyond that to many other layers and dimensions. I was the thorn in the side of the darkness, and this is true for all who bring joy to the world and happiness. This is why all involved with the performing arts are vulnerable, and many have lives ending tragically because they're manipulated relentlessly to create inner discord, have them engaged in things that create compromising situations so that they can be exposed through the tabloids at first and then on to the wider media and be blackballed for the rest of time as a consequence of their reputation being shattered. We can tell you those were not defective people per se. They were manipulated to be blind for a time to their own morality, which did exist, but was circumvented through mind manipulation for them to take missteps and compromise themselves. That is often a way station working towards their demise, depending on what is needed to silence the individual in question. The idea I was so unstable I would destroy myself is a fiction, pure and simple. And those who truly knew me would tell you this. I was not so far gone in the throes of despair that I wished to no longer exist. I had the wherewithal to work on things and to change things. And there were many times I did so. And I had help I was unaware of at the time, lifting me up to keep me going. because I wanted to be doing so, and it was in divine alignment. So the divine helped me, as they helped many others. But there are limits to what the divine can do when people are unaware of the power of the darkness and the vulnerability they are choosing for themselves in not being in a close partnership with the divine in their thinking and requests for divine safety. Had I been doing the latter, they would not have been able to cause my death in that fashion. It would have been thwarted by divine intervention. This is done for many in my situation. And through endless variations and strategies to deflect the hatred and animosity, to distract, to cause some realignment of priorities at the last moment, and so on. And then to have interest wane in seeking vengeance against a particular performer. In this fashion, they are keeping the world going. Creator and the divine team working in concert in all kinds of ways behind the scene, looking for openings to bring more light to bear, to raise up the darkness where it can be done, to soften their resolve and soften their hearts a bit so their hatred will ease up and then be distracted and directed elsewhere. That restarting of things and focusing on a new target gives a breather for the former would-be victims to regroup and reclaim a level foundation once again in their lives. This is an ongoing contest, a back and forth, push and pull of energies. The energy on the divine side is unlimited, but it can only be dispensed in proportion to human will, human intention. That is what is in short supply. You are letting the darkness win at the moment by neglecting the spiritual. You are not reaching out to the Almighty to ask for assistance. You are not asking for the perpetrators to be raised up and heal so they will stop their evil implementation of disaster in all levels of human endeavor. That is what got to me eventually on a personal level. This depression I suffered and has been reported, at least with accuracy in regard to it having existed, was entirely an intervention by the darkness to drag me down, dispirit me, discourage, and deplete my energy, and eventually cause my demise. it is an irony that the strong are hated more and given greater opposition than the weak. For many at low levels, they're satisfied if you sideline yourselves and retire from the field of battle, so to speak, remaining on the sidelines, unknown and uninvolved. For those who have made a mark, you, in a sense, mark yourselves for retribution, and they will come after you, both in this life and the next. They will see you coming when you incarnate again, and they will work on you in earnest from your time in the cradle to corrupt you and diminish you, so you never again will have a career of note and in a position to influence others in a positive way. This is true depravity we are speaking of. As a consequence, I was killed and I was hindered in returning to the light, because my death was a shock to me and I was unprepared for transition. I was not in the best spiritual alignment, and that was enough to delay things for me. But only a delay. And I was eventually rescued and raised up so that I could once again go home. And I'm now able to see all that happened with new eyes and greater understanding. It is impossible with words in the forum we have today for me to convey all that I know you should be privy to, but are not. In part, there are time limits, but also there is more needed at your end to engineer for the awakening to be fully effective and reach the level of understanding truly needed to stop what is underway here. You are in the crosshairs of an annihilation plan, and yet you are worried about me and what happened to me. This does give us a platform to speak out. And we know that the members of Get Wisdom are in earnest in spreading the deeper, darker truth of things. That is the best take-home message you can have. There is no time to waste. You are either working for the light or you are working for the darkness. Being in ignorance, being complacent, being passive is helping the darkness to commit their atrocities. You are responsible because you came here to bring light to bear, to bring divine truth and awaken others and save everyone and everything from the madness. If you are not healing the perpetrators ravaging the world, you are not taking care of business, the business you came to attend to.
Okay, thank you. The official mainstream media story is that you struggle with depression, and that story was used to bolster the claim that you had committed suicide. But it was also reported by some close to you that you were in good spirits, and some claimed that you were about to go public regarding what you knew about the Hollywood and music industry pedophile rings, thereby giving a motive for murder. Were you about to go public? And can you elaborate on the truths and untruths given with respect to both sides of this argument?